Good.
Computer.
Absolutely.
Okay, so today I am joined by my good friend, Dr. Kirk Gair. Uh, Kirk, I appreciate you talking with me today.
Well,
Uh,
thanks for having me on.
you're the best person to answer the big question.
Okay.
The big question is, and I should have brought it in here with me, when people see that red laser, mine's red and blue because of the
Yeah.
EVRL. The big
Right.
question is from patients, well, what does that do?
Okay.
So I want to
Awesome.
talk about that, and I want
Sure.
to talk about the big difference because a lot of people confuse laser for red light therapy. Just because in
Right.
my particular
Right.
model, the laser's red. So
Correct.
you're the guy we met about 6 years ago. You were teaching at the IAFNR
Yeah.
module or
6 years,
seminar
man. It's crazy.
for laser. And anyway, I'm going to spare you the long
Yeah.
story of how I ended up back in your office 6 years later. um,
It is a good story for them to know about,
so,
your son and what laser did for him, It's
it's awesome, and we're actually going to talk about that on the on Erchonia's podcast on the Laser Light Show. Uh, that's the story we're going to talk about next week there, so that'll be pretty awesome. You froze on me. Oh, how I love technology.
just bizarre. All right. There we go.
Let's try this again.
All right. Yeah. We'll start it over. Yeah.
I'm joined today by my friend and absolute stud, Dr. Kirk Gair. Long story short, Dr. Gair is the laser guy. I met him about 6 years ago at an IAFNR seminar where he was teaching about laser. And fast forward to earlier this year, my son and I ended up in your office, giving him the help he needs, and now he's going to be a track stud this coming
That's
season.
awesome.
So,
That's fantastic.
Kirk, thank you for taking a few minutes with me.
Sure.
There's two big questions I want to answer for people. Number one is, how does laser work? What is that red light doing? And
Sure.
number two, how does it differ from red light therapy?
Sure. Good questions. Common questions, definitely.
I know I have my pat answer and I have my poster that I like to show to people when they ask, but I want to hear how you answer a patient when they ask you, what is this doing?
Sure. One of the easiest ways, I'm going to show it with my laser here that I've got. This is the GVL that I've got over here. So you see there's a green and a violet one there.
The newest, shiniest one.
The shiniest object in the bunch. Yes, exactly. So my explanation to patients is this. I said, let's pretend that my laser is sunlight and my hand is a plant's leaf. In plants' leaves, there are light receptive cells called photoreceptors that when sunlight hits those, they're going to absorb the photons of energy from sunlight and then make food. And a key point there that's through photosynthesis is that it's not going to stay just in the leaf. It's going to go throughout the whole plant to make that whole plant healthy. Now, in your patient's bodies, let's say that we shine sunlight on your arm, you're going to do some different reactions there from those photons of energy being absorbed by those photoreceptors in your skin. You can do things like make melanin for a suntan. Another cool thing you can do is you can make vitamin D, and that's not just going to stay right here. That's going to go throughout your whole body and do things like make your bones stronger, support your immune system, decrease inflammation. You can also impact your brain with having it here by affecting your melatonin levels for sleep and wakefulness. Now, when we get the laser on you, you're going to get some different reactions. One of the things that's really cool there is, which a lot of your patients have heard about, is stem cells. You're going to trigger the production of stem cells in that area. And again, they're not just going to be here. So when your patients are getting that treatment of the laser on them, you get the primary effect here, but you get something called an abscopal effect, which is where laser goes global. It goes everywhere. And so you're getting stem cell production here, but that can actually impact things going on in the brain as well, too. You're also going to decrease inflammation. You're going to improve blood flow. And one of the coolest things is you are actually going to increase the amount of energy in the form of what's called ATP that your cells produce. And that's necessary for pretty much everything that you need to do, is by increasing this energy. And we look at what things can disrupt energy. One of the big things is going to be if someone had a COVID infection. Long COVID's been shown to disrupt mitochondria function, which that's the little powerhouse of the cells that the lasers are affecting to make energy. Other things they can do it is autoimmune diseases, chronic illnesses. But here's the thing, probably the most common thing that will disrupt energy production and why your patients need laser is if patients are on statin medications. We think about how many people are on that. If they're on anti-inflammatory medications, steroids, if they're on things like Tylenol, like aspirin, and who hasn't been on that with an injury, or if they're on antidepressants and antipsychotics, just those common medications will shut down their body's ability to make energy. And when you get the laser on them, that specific Erchonia, that red laser, that's actually going to help them to produce this ATP and to kind of clear out that dysfunction that's been going on from the medication. So those are the few things that we get there. The crazy thing is, when we look at the research, if you go into PubMed and you read about all the studies that have been done on laser going back to the 1960s, when the Soviet Union was ahead of us with it, they're doing it on everything. And it starts to read like snake oil, because you see how the Russians were using it over the liver, and they were using this to actually regenerate liver tissue because it stimulated liver stem cells and hepatocyte growth factor. We look at when we get on the brain, tons of studies showing that if we pulse it at 40 hertz, you can even reverse neurodegeneration because you can break apart some of the protein misfoldings that occur in there. And you can make new nerve connections. So your patients who've got, like, say, brain fog from Hashimoto's, or a brain fog from long COVID, or they're an athlete who's had a lot of concussions, or they've got a history of dementia or stroke, we can get that laser in the brain. And the energy from the laser will actually get into those areas that are damaged, especially if we activate them while they're doing the laser therapy, and it can start to make these new nerve connections, decrease inflammation, make new blood vessels, just a whole host of wonderful things that occur when you get that laser on their body.
All from a reaction from light.
All from a reaction from light.
It's
amazing.
So I've been around lasers for my entire career, and next week when I go on the Laser Light Show, which is Erchonia's podcast with Chad Woolner, and who's the other doctor? Help me out.
You froze there again, Brady.
I was gonna say with Chad Woolner. I don't recall the other doc's name. I'll tell the whole story about how I've been around these my entire career, and it wasn't until I really had an aha moment last April that it really went into overdrive for me. I'll tell that whole thing.
Awesome. That's a great story.
So basically what I do when I sit down with my patients and I say, what is this going to do for me? The first thing I'll do is like, well, do you remember when we were kids and we stuck a flashlight in our mouth in a dark room, we inflated our cheeks? What did we see?
Oh yeah.
Right. We saw that light going all the way through our cheeks. You can see the blood vessels. Light energy goes through tissue unbelievably well.
It does.
So when people ask me, well, how deep does the laser go? And I'll tell them it goes deeper than you think, but the question's actually irrelevant, because
it is irrelevant.
When you have this photochemical reaction inside of the cell, that cell is going to send out chemical messengers to the surrounding cells to do the same thing. And that's where that whole like cascade effect. What did you call that cascade effect? You had a name for it.
Abscopal. That's the official research term. Ab, like AB, and then SCOPAL, abscopal effect.
I learned a new word today.
Cool. Well, it's fun. I've been doing lasers for 19 years also, and I just learned this when I was pouring through research probably in the last 6 months, because I've been talking about this global effect is what I called it, but there's a term in research, the abscopal effect, and they said it actually makes it difficult to like, let's say if you have an injury on the right side and an injury on the left side in a research model, let's say with rats, they would cut the sciatic nerve on one side and also on the other side. And they said when they'd apply it on only one side, the other side also would heal faster than the control rat. So they said it makes it a problem for experiments on just one animal because of that global effect.
It also explains like the FDA clearances with these Erchonia lasers for carpal tunnel, because the studies that were done were actually they lasered their neck and their carpal tunnel got better. That's pretty wild stuff.
Yes, it is wild. If you want to get into really wild, if you look at where the research is going now, when we're talking about lasers and we're talking about how the brain is working, whatnot, a lot of it is talking about, this will blow your patient's mind. They're talking about the brain as being like a quantum holographic computer. And when we look at, and this is kind of where it talks about where you asked about, you know, what's the difference between, say, a red light that's non-coherent like an LED versus lasers, is that they're talking about how the cells in the body actually send these what are called biophotons, which are coherent. And what that means for people is that they're laser-like. And the crazy thing is like, let's say we get this laser. I take this laser and I put it on my arm here like this. It's going to trigger these cells in the area to make their own coherent biophotons, which are laser-like impulses. And then these are going to go through the cell structure, the what are called microtubules, like it's a liquid crystal display. And when it gets up and it hits the brain, then it's going to trigger the brain to release these biophotons they say contain qubits of information, which is like quantum data. And that just goes globally throughout the brain. So when you read it, it's like, okay, this sounds like science fiction. What is this, the Matrix? But that's where a lot of the research is going. And that goes back to your question people have. Well, how far does this penetrate? Because they'll get bombarded on Facebook with a bunch of, you know, the most powerful red light that has the deepest penetration. It's like, I look at those things, I'm like, man, you guys are like 40 years behind in research, because you're looking at how far does something go into dead tissue. You're not thinking about, as you mentioned, some of these enzymatic reactions, these photochemical reactions. You're not thinking about how there's blood vessels coursing through the tissue, getting it everywhere. So like when we put the laser, if I put the laser here on my arm, there are these mitochondria floating around in the blood vessels that are going to pick up the energy, and it's going to go everywhere. So it's super, super cool stuff when you think about it. I nerd out on it.
Well, I tell my patients all the time that, you know, there's over 9,000 studies that have been done on these things.
Yeah.
And they've been done on everything from arthritis to acne and everything in between.
Everything, yeah.
And it's actually been really cool with some of the traumatic brain stuff and some of the post-stroke stuff that we've seen, how quickly you can make a difference with somebody.
Well, I loved your vertigo post. That method that you kind of came up with, that was really, really cool, man. I actually show that in my seminars now. So you're getting, well, you saw it when I was doing the live stream in Seattle. Yep. You got a little shout out there.
I was like, hey, that's my video. I should actually send you the, when we're done, I'll send you the actual like copy off my phone. So it's a little more.
Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be great.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. I'll happy to do that. So why is this different from just like red light therapy?
Yeah. So when we look at red light therapy, one of the things is that it's non-coherent, which means that it's not coming out in a uniform direction, versus lasers, everything is in parallel. And that creates some different reactions in the skin. So like when your patients are in the office, they can see that there's this speckle when they look at the laser, and you can see this little like glistening that's occurring. That speckle reaction actually allows for more movement of the photons of energy throughout the cell tissue. It also causes some changes in the cell membrane with the polarization of the cell membrane, and that allows other reactions to occur. Also, it triggers these biophotons that I mentioned. So when I mentioned that study on the brain being a quantum holographic computer, they were talking about these biophotons that they're ultra weak. They're very, very low in their power level, but the brain is sending these impulses. And if the light is non-coherent, the study said that if the brain filters it out and ignores it. So when we get a laser on here, we're basically speaking the language of the cells, because they speak in this coherent laser-like biophoton fashion that you don't get with an LED. And that's what a lot of the LED manufacturers don't understand. They're like, oh, well, light is light. It's the same thing, but it's not. You get a different thing by the sequence of it. The example that's used in the book by Tuner and Hode is they talk about soldiers walking over a bridge. And if you have just tourists walking over a bridge, they're walking in a random pattern, and it doesn't have any impact on the bridge. But if you have soldiers walking in lockstep formation where their steps are synchronized, depending on the frequency that they hit it, they can actually cause that bridge to oscillate and break apart through resonance. So that those soldiers walking in lockstep is like laser. And so laser can do different reactions in the cells and in scar tissue and other things that an LED can't.
That's just absolutely mind-blowing to me. It just reminds me, I'll never forget, you know, that weekend that I spent with you in Salt Lake when I ended up coming home and buying a laser, and I took it to the clinic that I was previously working at, and the owner of that clinic goes, well, this laser we have is the most powerful laser on the market. I'm like,
powerful.
Does it matter?
Yeah. Yeah, and they look at the power so much, and you've got the EVRL, right? You've got the red and violet. But yeah, So we look at that. This is important for your patients to know this. Is people always say, "What's the difference with the light color? What does it make?" Because some people will say, "Well, like that doc, all I got to do is ramp the wattage up and ramp the power up." All that's doing is increasing the dose, but it doesn't affect the energy of that particular photon.
Right.
So the easiest way for patients to understand it is let me have them go lie down in a tanning bed for 20 minutes and see what happens to the body, and then let me put them under an infrared heat lamp for 20 minutes. And what's the difference? Like, heat lamps that you see, it's not to knock the other lasers, it's just they have a different reaction. It's more
Right.
of a thermal and a mechanical reaction. Whereas if you got ultraviolet, you're going to get a suntan, you can get vitamin D production and melanin production. So, like with your violet laser, that is the most energetic wavelength of therapeutic lasers that are available out there. So that has the voltage per individual photon is 3.1 electron volts. That's where some really cool magic happens, because you can actually cause electrons to move into different orbits and trigger this cascade of other types of reactions that occur. And that's where you can do things like research is showing support for COVID infections, support versus MRSA infections. One study I read was 92% effective against MRSA because of the way it supports the immune system, and it creates these whole cascades that occur. It's great for breaking down scar tissue. You can't do that with, say, the red as well. The red can do some of it, but not the same. And you can't do that with infrared either. So we get all these specific reactions. Or when I'm showing you my green one here, the green one, there's certain reactions we can do there with stem cells that just don't occur. So there are these wavelength specific reactions that occur that it's kind of like you need the right key to unlock the right enzyme and the right molecular reaction. But a lot of doctors, unfortunately, don't understand that.
They don't. And what they also don't understand is you get these ones with these high power outputs. You're heating tissue.
Yeah.
That's
You're heating tissue, and then you're also dosing it really high. So what a lot of them will argue, and you'll see this, you just look at your Facebook feed, you're going to see all these LED companies trying to say this one has the highest wattage out there. And it's like, okay, all that's doing is dosing you with a lot of photons. And the example I like to say is, let's say that you're in the hospital and you need an IV. That IV is on a drip to get you a certain dosage in a certain time. Now, what if you took that IV and just pushed it all in within 5 minutes? Now you can have something that is actually negative, that gets a different reaction on there. Or let's say they're supposed to take a medication 3 times in a day, and they say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to take all my medication 1 time today, or I'm going to take my medication for the next 2 days right now. You can have a different effect. And the same thing is true of laser therapy. There's this Goldilocks zone to where you need the right dosage, not too little, not too much. You got to have it just right in there, and you get different reactions depending on that.
It's just amazing to me how powerful these things are, how well researched they are, how well documented they are. So it's important for us to share this message, just because they just flat don't know.
They flat don't know, and a lot of times too, they'll run into it to where the providers they go to don't know about it either. So a good example I've got a patient who had long COVID, and we hear a lot about people with loss of taste or loss of smell. She had something I think was way worse. She had altered taste, and she told me that for 2 years, everything she ate tasted rotten. And she said she would eat something, she'd want to throw it up. She'd smell onions right off the bat. She was nauseated. So this poor girl, she's in her early 20s. She'd gone to neurologists or medical doctors, etc. They're like, well, we don't really have a treatment for it. We can try this, we can try that. Nothing had worked. So she's really actually was hopeless. Her mom forced her to come in, and we started doing the laser on her brain. And I'd have her just do basic stuff. I'd have her smell and taste to her tolerance. And literally the first time we did it, within a minute, she was ready to throw up because she hit her threshold. But, we did 8 sessions. By the 8th session, we were up to like an 8-minute treatment on there. And she was able to eat by Thanksgiving. And she said for the first time in 2 years, she was able to enjoy holiday food at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. And you think about, first of all, if I never buy a laser 19 years ago, and if I never learn how to use it, she doesn't get help from me. It may not get help from anybody. Right. And then if her mom doesn't drag her in there, she's stuck with this everyday altered sense of taste and, looking anorexic. So some of these things are life-changing and do with the lasers.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's pretty amazing. And the short story that I'll tell you, and then we'll wrap it up because we both have things to do, is I've got it's actually my accountant's daughter. She's in her 30s. She goes in to have a vein surgery in her leg, has a thalamic stroke.
Oh,
as a result. Wow. So a clot busts loose and lands in her brain, causes a stroke. And the doctors are like, well, we know you got 3 kids. We know you're an accountant and you're a very smart girl. maybe it'll get better, maybe it won't. And that was literally her answer. So, you know, her accountant brings him to me, and we use lasers and some of the other protocols and some of the, you know, things that we've talked about in the past. And this girl's back to functioning normally again.
That's awesome.
So
Life changing. Yeah.
We see this stuff day in and day out. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And it becomes almost, you think it would become normal where you're not amazed at it, but I'm still amazed every day in my office because it's just so, what I love is I love getting the laser out and the patient kind of looking at it, almost scoffing because like, what is this barcode scanner laser leveler going to do? Yeah.
And it's barely bigger than a cell phone.
Phone, yeah, and they're looking at it like, what is this going to do? And then I do things, and boom, their range of motion's better, and their pain's gone. They're like, what the hell did you just do? The funny thing is, I had this lady who was going nuts the other day because she hadn't been able to do jujitsu in like 6 months. She was really frustrated because her shoulder was so painful. I do this on her, and she's like, I was able to go and grapple and roll and do this stuff. She said, I was telling everybody, I was like handing out your cards. And she said, my son actually said, Mom, are you getting paid by this guy to promote it? And she said, no, I just love this so much. Everybody needs to know about this and use it, because she's like, I suffered for months when I didn't have to.
That's awesome. It's incredible stuff that we see, isn't it?
It is. It's a lot of fun.
Well, Kirk, I really appreciate you taking this time with me.
Well, thanks for having me on, Brady. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your group and all that you do, and I'll look forward to your next. I'm going to become you and Dr. Murphy's groupie.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. Well, I appreciate your post in there, man. That's great stuff that helps out. Having good docs like you in there to share their take on laser, because we all have a little bit of something else that we can add into it, you know. So that even teaches me as well too. So it's much appreciated.
Awesome. Well, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.